Welcome to the Prophecy Club. We are going to continue talking about archaeology, but we're going to go in a bit of a different direction. Now, for the last several broadcasts, we've been focusing on the very first DVD that I ever made in the spring of 1991, called Archaeology Confirms the Bible. And if you've listened to those 4 broadcasts, I think you agree with me. You have to get that DVD. You have to see what is on that DVD because it's some awesome stuff. I mean, we're talking about the tomb of Jesus, crossing side of the Red Sea, amazing archaeology stuff. Now, we put that together with, actually, there's 4 discs in this particular offer. You get Archaeology Confirms the Bible. That's the one we've been listening to here for the last week, made in 1991. It's awesome. And then I made another new one talking about Noah's Ark in October of 2012 called Noah's Ark Confirms the Bible. But what we're about to listen to today is from Michael Rood. He came in, he actually made 2 different discs, and the title has 2 different titles. One is Endtimes Archaeology. The other one is Dead Sea Scrolls. And this is an awesome gift offer for an awesome offer. You get 4 discs valued at $80 for a gift of $40. And Michael Rood's 2 DVDs are what we're about to listen to, so let me tell you about those. Michael takes you on one of the most thrilling archaeological discovery tours, basically, of modern-day Israel. He presents some of the most recent photographs and video footage and artifacts smuggled out of Saudi Arabia and displays, for example, a grinding stone from Mount Sinai, which probably was used to grind manna. You'll find that very interesting. Unfortunately, you can't see it on radio, which is why you got to buy the DVD set. He also shows Israeli arrowheads that litter the desert of Midian, intact remains of the altar made to the golden calf, the rock, this is the one that Moses struck at Rephadim, which split, of course, massive amounts of water. I mean, a river poured out of this giant rock. You're going to also see Har Karkum, one of Israel's camping locations during the 40 years of wandering in the wilderness. All kinds of amazing things. You got to get this gift offer. It's the Archaeology gift offer. You can get it at prophecyclub.com or by calling 785-266-1112. 4 discs, 3 titles, valued at $80, gift of $40. Today we're going to go listen to Michael Rood speak on Endtimes Archaeology and the Dead Sea Scrolls. You'll find it fascinating.
Right behind the grain bins, however, are the executive offices. And on the walls of the executive offices, you see the man on the throne, Imhotep, in Egyptian, or Yosef, the scholar, the scribe. You see people bringing in goods to him one way and leaving with goods going the other way. Now, let's talk about what happened after Joseph. The Israelites were enslaved. One of these slaves was hidden away in the Nile River, and the daughter of Pharaoh found him. His name was Moses. She named him Moses, which means to draw out of the water. Moses was raised in the house of Pharaoh. When Moses was older, he saw an Egyptian beating a Hebrew slave, and he killed the Egyptian. He knew that Pharaoh would find out about it, and so it says that Moses fled from the face of Pharaoh and dwelt in the land of Midian. He left the capital and he took the southern trade route. If he took the northern trade route, it would have taken him up into the land of the Philistines and the Canaanites. However, the southern route took him down along what is now the Suez Canal, across the Sinai Peninsula, and then around the northern end of the Yam Suf, or the Reed Sea, down into the land of Midian, where he became a Midianite shepherd in the tents of Yitro, married Zipporah, Yitro's daughter, and it was during that 40 years that he came across a bush that burned but was not consumed. He heard the voice of the Almighty, who spoke to him from Mount Sinai and told him that he would deliver the children of Israel as the promise of the Almighty was made to Abraham. He would be the deliverer, and he would lead the children of Abraham back to that very mountain in the land of Midian to worship him. So, that's the route that he traveled. Now, Let's see what happened in this Exodus when Moses went back. And after a series of plagues, finally he was given permission by Pharaoh for all of Israel to leave Egypt and travel 3 days into the desert. That's all we asked for. 3 days into the desert, but we had to take everything with us, which looked a little suspicious to begin with, I'll admit. But all we asked for was 3 days. And it says the children of Israel journeyed from Ramesses to Sukkot, about 600,000 men on foot that were men, beside the children. Ramesses is up to the north, and they traveled down to Sukkot. Why did they all travel down to Sukkot? Ramesses to Sukkot. Because it says Moses took the bones of Joseph with him. And they took their journey from Sukkot. They went down to the step pyramid where the bones of Joseph were entombed in this very city where he built to distribute the grain, and he became the savior of the entire land of Egypt. They entombed his bones, and the children of Israel gathered at Tent City. Because just outside of that wall, there is a plain so huge that millions of people could camp. And that's what happened when everyone came from the other nations. They camped, they put their tents up. It became known as Sukkot, or Tent City. That's where they then met all together because they know where the bones of Joseph are. And so they began their journey from this point, and they journeyed and encamped in Etham, in the edge of the wilderness. It happens to be the far edge of the wilderness. And the Lord went before them by day in a pillar of cloud to lead them by the way, and by night in a pillar of fire to give them light, to go by day and night. We went around the clock, day and night. We traveled 7 days and 7 nights to get down to the Yam Suf. And as we traveled, we had gone 3 days out into the desert, traveling day and night, but we kept going. Now, Pharaoh's sentries all along the trade route then rushed back to the capital and told Pharaoh, Israel has fled. Now, he knew that we left. We left with everything. But he did not know we were going to continue going. They said, Israel has fled. So then Pharaoh assembled all of his charioteers and took off on a dead charge after us as we continued traveling day and night across this desert. When we got to Etham, normally we would go up the north route around the end of the Yam Suf as we traveled up around that. But we didn't go up that way, because it says that God led us not through the land of the Philistines, but God led the people about through the way of the Red Sea wilderness. How did he do that exactly? It says instead of going up around the northern end, which was controlled by the Philistines to get into the land of Midian, where Mount Sinai is, instead, he said, turn and encamp before Pi-hahiroth, between Migdol and the sea, over against Baal-Zephon. You shall encamp by the sea. And we turned from that place, from Etham, and we entered into the Wadi Watir, and now we are going to travel down to Pi-hahiroth. In Egyptian, it is Pi-hahiroth, which means between the gorges. And you'll see that in just a few moments. Just north of there is Migdol, which in Hebrew means tower. It is an Egyptian military encampment on the Yam Suf. Right across 8 miles of water is Baal-Zephon, over against Baal-Zephon. This is the very place in which it took place. The archaeological remains of these things can still be seen to this very day. And it says, ye shall encamp by the sea, for Pharaoh will say of the children of Israel, they are entangled in the land. The wilderness hath shut them in. And so at Etham they entered into the Wadi Watir, which is a dry riverbed that still to this day is the main route from the beach at Nueva, which you can see right here, Pi-hahiroth, and it is still the main route that takes you to Cairo. It is a main thoroughfare. But it is a wadi, it is a dry riverbed, that once you enter into it, you don't get out until you get to that place between the gorges. This particular photograph was taken just a few years ago when Jamie Louie and I traveled the entire length of the Wadi Watir. This is where we're just entering into that way in the wilderness, and once you enter into that wadi, you don't get out. It is steep, mountains on both sides. If you have technical climbing gear, you can get out, but you don't take your family and your flocks and head over to the side. You are literally entangled in the land, and Pharaoh knows it. This is the main route that Pharaoh would go down to Migdol, down to the military encampment. It's still, to this day, you can see the asphalt highway that goes through there. He knows that once Israel enters into that wadi, he has them trapped because there's no way out. Oh, sure, they tried to disguise that they went down there. They broke off the sage bush and the brush and they wiped the ground like they did on the Lone Ranger. But you can't hide the footprints of 2.5 million people. They travel down this wadi and they get out to what is now called the beach at Nuweiba. And you see to the south, the mountains go all the way to the sea. There's no passage to the south. To the north is Migdol, the military encampment. Israel has their back to the sea, and Pharaoh's chariots are charging down that gorge. They are dead. This very situation led Yul Brynner to say, the God of Moses is a very bad general. There is no way out. They are dead, and they know it. A number of years ago, an amateur archaeologist found a Phoenician-style pillar right on the beach here at Nuweiba. This Phoenician-style pillar was laying awash on the shore, and when he saw it, he alerted the Israelis, because the Israelis held the Sinai Peninsula at that time. They looked at it, and they had gone to grade school. They looked at it and knew this is a Phoenician-style pillar from the time of Solomon. Common knowledge. This is exciting. They had the Army Corps of Engineers bring in a huge crane. They picked up this pillar from the time of Solomon, which goes back about 3,000 years, and they set it in concrete. They were excited about this. Had no idea where it came from, but this amateur archaeologist found it because he was doing something very novel. He was doing something that professional archaeologists don't do. Now, I will tell you, the name of this amateur archaeologist is Ronald Eldon Wyatt. Why he was a amateur archaeologist is because he was a nurse anesthetist by trade. And that's where he made his money. But he spent all of his money doing something that professional archaeologists don't do. See, what professional archaeologists have done, and these schools in America, they have funded archaeological expeditions to this part of the world, heavily funded. They can afford to go over there and spend decades digging holes and searching for things of antiquity in places where the Bible never said anything took place. So they search for an entire decade in some place that, according to the biblical record, you'd never find anything. And at the end of that time, they say that the Bible is full of errors because this never happened. Oh, brilliant. That's genius. Mr. Wyatt did something different. He carefully looked at the biblical record. He analyzed the original Hebrew text, and he followed these paths out and found himself right at this shore, and on this shore, he found a Phoenician-style pillar from the time of Solomon. A couple of years later, he took a rubber raft and braving the Arabian gunships from the other side, crossed the Yam Suf, 8 miles, and found an identical pillar, still standing, however. Instead of being awash on the beach with everything being eroded from it, this was standing, and in ancient Paleo-Hebrew, it could be made out. Shlomo, Solomon, Mitzrayim, Egypt, death, Pharaoh, and Yod-He-Vav-He. From that, he knew that Solomon, the wisest man in the world, who built his navy yard at Etzion-Geber, just 70 miles north, knew where the crossing site was, and he erected these pillars on each side of the Yam Suf as a memorial to Yahweh for the miracle of the crossing of the Red Sea on dry ground. Now, in the subsequent years, Israel had to give back the Sinai Peninsula. But after they gave back the peninsula, then the coral-encrusted remains of Pharaoh's chariots and army were found, strewn for over 1.5 miles on the bottom of the Red Sea. Tonight, you are going to go down with the most sophisticated robotic underwater dive cameras and high-resolution cameras as we go down there among Pharaoh's chariots and army. You're going to see things tonight that Mr. Wyatt never had the funding to bring out. He could never bring these things out because he just never had the finances, didn't have the time, didn't have the support. And Mr. Wyatt traveled many years ago with the Prophecy Club, laying many of these things out. But Mr. Wyatt died, and when he died, his work was finished. But yet the hand of the Almighty was not shortened, because he already put other people in place that were going to take the things that he found to the next level and far beyond anything that Mr. Wyatt could ever imagine. People with qualifications to do things that Mr. Wyatt never had, because he was just simply a servant. He did what he was supposed to do during his lifetime while he was alive. But tonight you are going to see the rest of the story, because the book of Acts is still being written. The Acts of the believers, moved by the Holy Spirit in ways that they couldn't even imagine at the time, are being led to bring forth things to put in our hands in this day and time so that we can stop the mouths of scoffers and we can give hope to those who desire to hear and to see. It was many years ago that I first saw a Prophecy Club video that was given to me by a pastor out on the West Coast. I'd been teaching all day on Bible prophecy, about 9 hours. I was exhausted, but this pastor came up to me and said, they found Pharaoh's chariots and army strewn for 1.5 miles on the bottom of the Red Sea, and we've got it on video. I tried to hide my look of disbelief, and I said, well, do you have a copy? Could you bring it to me? And I said, I've got a copy. He gave it to me. I went home, and at about midnight, after teaching all day long, I put that video in. I watched it. I rewound it. I watched it. I rewound it. I watched it until 5 o'clock in the morning, and I said, this is the greatest tool I have ever had in my hands in my life. And I thought, why has this not spread like wildfire through the Christian church? I am not an unaware person. I didn't consider myself completely out of the loop. But yet, some of this had been out for years, and I had no idea. Why haven't I heard about it? Well, I realized after about a week, the reason why more people haven't heard about it is because in 1 week, I only showed it to about 5 people. And I thought, at this rate, that's why no one hears about it, because if everyone was doing what I was doing, no one would ever get to hear. 5 people in a week. I was traveling up to Two Harbors, Minnesota. When I arrived there, I had a brilliant idea. If this message is going to get out, I am responsible to do it. And so what I did is I plotted out 2 days in which I went into every single business, every shoe store, every beauty parlor, every insurance agency, every restaurant in that little village. And Two Harbors, Minnesota is where 3M, Minnesota Mining and Manufacturing, was started. It has 4,000 people in the whole surrounding area. It's a small village. In fact, it's so small that if you make a call and you reach the wrong number, you still know the person that answers the phone. It happens all the time. It's that small. And so what I did is I went into every doorway, and as I went into the door, I threw the doors open, and I shouted out just as loud as it took to where everyone in the building could hear me, "You'll never guess what they found!" And I just froze, just like that. This bearded guy with his hat on. And finally, someone would say, okay, what did they find? They found Pharaoh's chariots and army strewn for 1.5 miles on the bottom of the Red Sea, and we've got it on video. I'll never forget this one man. He didn't turn red. He turned purple. He was so filled with rage. He let out the worst cursing I'd heard. He was absolutely furious, because I had just wrenched from him every vile and vain excuse he ever had to believe that the Bible is full of fairy tales. Because I'm telling him that right now, in this modern world, we have the video that God did a miracle that cannot be denied. Amen. And he was furious. And I'll never forget when I walked into the bank, the teller at the first window, she stood there frozen for a moment when I said that, and then the tears just started pouring down her face. That's what she wanted to hear her whole life, that the Word of God is real, it's alive. She believed it, but to have evidence right now that it's alive, that it's real, it just went right to her heart. That's the person I'm looking for, not the guy that goes ballistic with rage, but the person that has a tender heart, that wants a touch of the Holy Spirit in their life. When I saw that, something changed right then. I went over to Superior Shores and I rented their ballroom, which was just in construction, hadn't been used, and they brought in the television from the bar and set it up. That Friday night, I invited everyone. From then on, I went into these buildings and I invited everyone to come out and see. 70 people from that little community showed up, including several scientists from the National Laboratory of the Environmental Protection Agency in Duluth. The next day, on Saturday, this was spreading like wildfire through the entire community. People were so excited about it. They were talking with their friends, their neighbors, their relatives, people that they've never talked to about the Bible before, but all of a sudden it was so real that they were on fire. They were so excited to share. And then Sunday came. And then I found out why this had not spread like wildfire through the Christian church. Because when they went to their Sunday school classes, and they went to their churches, those pastors began to throw cold water on it as fast as they possibly could. Because if this did not come through their denomination, it has no validity. They are the paid professionals. If they don't say it, it's not true. Certainly, if the Almighty is going to do anything as magnanimous as in this day and time is to reveal the chariots and army of Pharaoh on the bottom of the Red Sea, certainly he will do it through the Episcopalian Church. Or the Lutherans. And if it doesn't come through us, then it is worthless. And in one day, those professional religious leaders killed the work of the Holy Spirit, and by Monday, it was dead. It was a very important lesson, but a lesson that had to be learned, because the system doesn't need to be and doesn't want to be woken up. The system works. If you just come in, sit down, shut up, pay your 10% religion tax, which is authorized by the 501c3, tax-exempt non-corporations doing business as the modern Christian church under the Internal Revenue Service Code. And if you start asking questions, you will find out that the system doesn't need you. It needs you to shut up. In the next week, I am bombarded with anti-Ron Wyatt literature that these professional preachers are getting off the internet. And I end up with the world's largest privately held collection of anti-Ron Wyatt literature. I go through and I read it all, and I decide that I have got to hear it directly from the person. And so while I was up there in Minnesota, I sold the last of my worldly treasures because it was going to take that to make this trip. And after a meeting with Henry Groover one weekend, I knew then that I needed to go see Ron Wyatt. Because Henry Groover during that weekend told a story that was so compelling that I knew then I had to see Ron. I called him up and I said, Ron, I would like to come down and spend a week with you and talk to you about the Ark of the Covenant and some other issues. And I could hear his hesitation on the other line, and he said, well, have you seen the videos? Do you have any specific questions? And I'd only spoken to him once before at that point, and he didn't know me at all. And so I stopped at that moment because, I know he's thinking, who is this person? Come down and spend a week with me? Like, right. And so I said, Ron, I believe that if you'll pray, the Lord will tell you whether I'm supposed to come down or not. He said, okay, call me back in 3 days. I called him back in 3 days, and he said, come on down. So I made the trip down, and on the way, I sold the last of my worldly treasures. And when I did so, I said, Lord, there's only one thing I want. I am giving up these things that I've had for years. Some of them I've worked. I've searched for this one thing for 35 years, and now that I have it, I'm selling it because I have to make this trip, and there's only one thing I want. I want to know if Ron Wyatt is a liar or if he tells the truth. And I want him to be exposed for who he truly is. That's what I'm asking for, because what I saw that was posted on the internet was very disturbing. I went down there and spent a week working with him on the museum just before it was built. And at the end of that period of time, the last night in his home after dinner, the things that he shared with me, then I knew there was one thing that I had to share with him. And when I did, the lights went on, and he gave me the confirmation, and when I walked out of there, I knew that he was telling the truth. I knew that he had found the Ark of the Covenant, and it was not a light thing. I knew that he had found the Red Sea crossing site. And then I went back and reread all that anti-Ron Wyatt literature, and I found that this is all coming from people who did not have any first-hand information. According to the scriptures, they are false witnesses. If you go into a court of law and you testify about something that you've heard, but you have not been a first-hand witness, you will be in bracelets, led out, and thrown in the slammer. The Torah is not so kind. It says, those who have borne false witness, you bring them before the elders, and they are to make diligent inquiry. And if they have found that this person is borne false witness, that they have said something about someone else, which will do harm to them, which they do not have first-hand information, then it is eye for eye, tooth for tooth, life for life, cut their head off. That's the only way you are going to stop these liars. And when you find them to be a false witness, if it would have cost the other person their life, it's over with. So I became a first-hand witness. And then I began to go to the land of Israel. I went to these places. I went to the city of Gomorrah. I have the world's largest privately held collection of brimstone that rained down out of heaven nearly 4,000 years ago because I followed the same path that Ron Wyatt did when he found it.
Well, unfortunately, I'm going to have to interrupt right there, but it is important that you get this particular gift offer. It's called Archaeology Gift Offer. You get 4 discs, 3 titles. 3 titles are Archaeology Confirms the Bible. That was made in 1991 by me when I went to Noah's Ark and crossing side of the Red Sea, all kinds of amazing things, Sodom and Gomorrah, lots of stuff. Then I made another DVD in 2012 called Noah's Ark Confirms the Bible, talking about what we saw in Noah's Ark. Then we had Michael Rood in to make a double DVD set called Endtimes Archaeology and Dead Sea Scrolls. All 4 of those DVDs valued at $80 for a gift of $40, and I promise you, you will be glad you got this set. I mean, there's things on here that you will not hear anyplace else. Anyplace else. You will really, really like this. You get it at prophecyclub.com, Archaeology Gift Offer, or by calling 785-266-1112. Archaeology Gift Offer. Thank you for listening. Thank you for your prayers, and thank you for your regular monthly support. God bless. Now from the Prophecy Club, some exciting opportunities for you. The next speaker at the Prophecy Club is Brian Melvin. He was an atheist that drank contaminated water and died. He tells what it's like to die and stand before judgment, then be sent to hell with demons tormenting him. Worse than your worst nightmare. First talk is Hell in a Box. Topics: reliving my evil past, what it was like to die, first tricked inside a cell, tour of the pit, woman arriving in a cell, sex offenders in hell, rescue by Jesus. Then he was taken to heaven. Next talk is From Hell to Heaven. Topics: life after hell, the PSTD of hell, translated to heaven, match it with the Bible, Jesus the Son of Man, land of liquid love, field of reunion and reconciliation, know everything in heaven, the grand estates, the river of life, glowing for 3 days upon his return. That's Brian Melvin, Sunday morning, April 30th, at the Prophecy Club, 2540 K Avenue in Plano. Be seated at 8:30, speaking from 9 to noon. No charge. The DVD Hell in a Box and Hell to Heaven, gift of $30. His book A Land Unknown, Hell's Dominion, gift of $20. Get both of them at prophecyclub.com for a gift of $45, or call 785-266-1112, the Brian Melvin gift offer. DVD 30, book 20, both gift of $45, Prophecy Club, or 7